Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name is Adam Hanlon. I'm the editor of Wetpixel, and we'd like to thank Nauticam for sponsoring this episode. Nauticam do a huge range of housings, wet contact optics, ports, lenses. Oh, they don't actually do lenses, but ports, arms, and other accessories. Go and check them out at nauticam.com. I'm thrilled to be joined by my friend and fellow presenter, Alex Mustard. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Adam. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. It's been a while. We've been
it's been a little while.
We've been struggling with our schedules to try and match up, so it's great to see you. And in the interim, one of the sort of major underwater photography competitions major photography wildlife competitions has announced, and that's the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. And I thought it would be good to have a chat about it. And I feel that the results this year, well, I think in future we're going to look back on this year and say it was the year of the quirk. What do you think, Alex?
Well, I think it was definitely a year in the... So first of all, I think the Wildlife Photographer is sort of the most important contest that you can enter as an underwater photographer. But I think it's very important to always remember that it isn't an underwater photography competition. And so it always is, has a slightly different take on things than sort of a typical underwater photography competition judged by underwater photographers would perhaps do.
Yep.
I think that this year, the Wildlife Photographer was definitely a set of images that celebrates underdog species. I know in the past we've often joked that, particularly sort of 10 years ago or so, that the underwater category used to be won by whoever saw the coolest thing that year. And It wasn't about the photography. It was all about the subject. And it was kind of who had the coolest subject to impress land judges. I think that this year, the competition, very much wanted to celebrate less charismatic species. The overall winner was a picture of bees. And the underwater category winner was a very, sort of very mundane species, Tony Wu's picture of the starfish spawning.
Yeah.
And something that Tony was very pleased about because, he very much sees it as part of his project, celebrating the 99% of species that we generally consider uncharismatic, uninteresting, and telling their stories. So I think he was particularly proud, having had all his previous success in the competition with big spectacle images, to have some success with a relatively mundane subject, but creating, in my opinion, a really beautiful image of it.
I mean, certainly Tony's sort of normal images in these competitions, sperm whales and big charismatic species. And it shows the breadth of his talent, really, being able to not only win with sleeping sperm whales from Dominica, but also being able to win with a spawning starfish. I think, for me, it's an interesting image. It's not an image that is a showstopper. And I think maybe that may be in part because it is probably a somewhat less charismatic subject. But it's beautifully shot. As you'd expect from Tony. It's at the peak of the action. All that stuff is absolutely true. I think it's a little bit too out there. I get the kind of the other worlds, universes, galaxies, all that kind of thing that people do see in it, but it doesn't. I think it's probably a bit too clever for me. Actually, that's the truth of it.
Well, no, that's not surprising, Adam. So, but no, I really like the shot. I think it's great to see in the underwater category, which for so long was all about subject, to see a picture that isn't about subject doing so well. So I think that's a really sort of important milestone for us as an underwater photography community. I do think, I'm looking at the picture now on the front page on the Wetpixel news story about it.
Yeah.
And I do think when you see it small online, it's a little bit, I could pass it by. Yeah. When you see it printed big and experience it big, it is commanding in the exhibition.
Right.
And I think, I've seen it a lot in the exhibition, having, gone down there and seen it. And I think it's, that probably makes a big difference to how much we appreciate it. So I'd definitely encourage anyone to, if you are only looking at it online, get it up full screen and really appreciate it. It is an image that, it's just a starfish, shedding sperm. It's not that exciting. But actually, when you see it big, there's a lot going on in that image. And it's part of I had the fortune that week, at the end of that week, to give a presentation down in Bristol with Tony as part of sort of the ongoing events around the wildlife photographer, and saw more of the images from this whole project that he's done, working on really revealing behaviors of everyday creatures all around Japan, where he's been, sort of based over the lockdown period. And within that set of images, you also see the craft that's gone into this. So I'm really happy to see this winning the underwater category in the wildlife photographer, because I think it sets a lot of great precedents going forward about what the competition can mean. Yep. Right, should we have a look at some of the other pictures?
Yeah, so I'm just scrolling down the page that's on the Wetpixel announcement, and the next picture is a picture of Ellen Koilatz, a friend of Wetpixel, certainly, much less Tony, but and it's a top one. I'm pretty sure this is the one shot in the Caymans. Am I right, Alex?
Yes, it was shot, I think, back in 2014, and actually that summer I was diving with Ellen about a month after this picture was taken, and photographing these subjects together. And we reflected on that fact that it was amazing that, 8 years later, or however many years later it was, there we were both able to celebrate its success together in London. Yeah. Because, the whole wildlife photographer experience is incredible, going to the award ceremony, being part of the dinner, seeing the pictures in the museum, in the gallery. I really like this picture. And it's funny because there's, I would shoot this subject matter very differently. I generally would, put more strobe on it to reveal more details. I would shoot with a more closed aperture to, have sharper corners. I would probably get a richer blue from the background. Yet, I really love Ellen's picture, and I love it really because of the timing of the shot. Yeah. I like its muted colors. As she has it, it's edging its way towards black and white, in that it's quite desaturated, but it's the positioning of all the tarpon not overlapping with each other. I particularly like that silhouetted tarpon at the top of the frame that really pulls your eye through the picture. And there's a lovely rhythm in the composition with the swirling movement of all the different elements. So actually, this is another of the pictures I really like from the contest. I find it quite interesting because I got the opportunity to shoot similar subject matter at the same time, or within a few weeks, in the same year, and chose very different direction for my pictures, but actually really like the directions that this picture's got.
I think it's got a great sense of movement. I really feel my eye is drawn into that curve at the bottom. It's got a great. You can feel the bait fish where they are swirling around you. I think it's. I think actually it's probably one of those pictures that if you ever been underwater with fish swirling around you, you automatically kind of relate to it, don't you? It captures that moment. So the next picture on the page is Tina Tormanen's picture of the perch, which we discussed in the previews. So I think we should move on to another very good friend and long-time contributor on Wetpixel, Tom Klein's picture of, I'm not sure, Alex, salmon, trout?
Oh, definitely salmon and definitely kind of, the moment of action. I love how that, I presume it's the, well, it looks like the female's vertical, but I'm not 100% sure. But the way that its tail in the water is stirring up the nest and everything, it's a real, peak of the action shot. I think it's great that, Tom, who's sort of dedicated decades to working with these subjects and lots of technical innovations to capture a whole variety of images, he's had this award at, such a prestigious level after all that years of work. And I think, that is one of the things that's great about the wildlife photographer, is when, someone's had a real specialty for years and years and years, and then has an image that no one else has got anything like. So really, really, really happy for Tom. Very, impactful image. I kind of, when I've been to shoot salmon, I've always sort of gravitated towards wanting to shoot the sockeye salmon because they're the most colourful, most vibrant. They stand out the most in the river. And this one's got a much more subtle colour palette with this particular species of salmon.
Again, I think this is probably an image that probably looked better big, because I think that at the small scale, the colours of it do tend to get a little bit lost into the background. And I'm sure if you saw it on a bigger palette, it would look more dramatic.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting on that point is that the wildlife photographer, when they judge it face to face, normally at the museum, they judge everything on a big projection screen with a
Yeah.
proper, very expensive projector that's fully calibrated and better, as good as a computer screen.
Yeah.
But they judge the pictures big.
Yeah.
This year, the wildlife photographer, because of COVID restrictions, was judged online. And
Oh,
it
really?
surprises me how many of the pictures actually need to be seen big to be appreciated,
Yeah.
despite the fact it was actually judged on computer screens.
Yeah, it's actually going to be.
Which I think surprised me in terms of what the speaking to the judges, that they did choose pictures that need to be seen big.
Yeah. 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 So the next picture in the article is Tom Peshak's picture of a. You helped me out earlier, Alex. My brain's gone.
That's a leopard seal.
Leopard seal. Thank you very much. How could I forget?
A skinny one as well.
Yeah, very charismatic species, and I've forgotten what its name was. How terrible. So I'm very conflicted about this picture in that, to me, leopard seals are wonderful creatures, even though I can't remember their names. They're beautiful creatures and are very, very interesting. I'm just not convinced it's that engaging a picture.
No, I completely agree with you on this, and I think Tom Peshak is undoubtedly a fantastic photographer.
Absolutely, yeah.
I love many of his pictures.
Yeah.
This picture, I don't get in that. I don't think it's a particularly strong image of this subject. This very competition has awarded much stronger pictures of this subject in the past.
Yeah.
And I don't understand what's there's obviously quite a lot of backscatter, or it might be bubbles on the dome port in the picture.
Yep.
The seal is sitting there looking to the side but not looking at anything.
Yep.
And it's sort of plonked in the middle of a frame.
Yep.
And I don't understand what the appeal is in this picture really at all.
Yep.
I completely think that Tom Peshak is the sort of photographer who should be awarded the wildlife photographer every year, because he always has amazing images.
Yep.
But for me, this one definitely isn't one of them.
And he shoots a lot. He does a lot of work for National Geographic and for the major players, and he shoots a lot, goes to amazing places. I mean, I bet on that same dive or snorkel, when he took that picture, he's probably got a bunch of other images which are really good.
I don't understand what it is about this one that is unusual in any way.
Yeah.
Maybe because you can see the rear flippers and they look a bit like a shark's tail.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I think is in any way sort of remarkable about this shot or pose.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those slightly confusing ones, and I do think that you always have to remember that these competitions are judged primarily by non-underwater people.
Yeah.
And every now and again they're like, "Oh, we've not seen one of those before." But I do think it should be in the remit or the obligation of the competition organizers that when the judges are favoring a shot that is a species and that they've had before, to say to them, look, this is what we've had before of this species. Do you really think this is breaking new ground, or is it just more of the same?
Yeah.
And we've been critical about that with all the Blackwater pictures over the last few years of them basically re-awarding the same shots again and again.
Yeah.
And I think that they probably need to take a bit more responsibility over that point. Now, the shot does look better, bigger than it does here on the Wetpixel page. Yeah. But it's far from my favorite Tom Peshak shot.
Yeah, no, I concur completely. Sticking with Antarctica for the moment, the portfolio category was won, perhaps predictably, by Laurent Ballester, prolific photographer who does some amazing projects. And these are all pictures from, I say Antarctica, I presume Antarctica. They're certainly the Arctic, whether it's Arctic or the Antarctic.
I'm almost certain they're Antarctica.
Yeah.
I think, it's a really great portfolio. I think one thing that's really interesting is that, two of the images have got divers in them.
Yeah.
And, for years and years, I would never consider entering a picture with a diver in as part of the wildlife photographer.
Yeah.
And I know Laurent's before had an iceberg shot in there with divers in the wildlife photography, which I find quite interesting. That, if the pictures are good enough, they don't mind that human element in the picture, in a picture that's purporting to show nature, not, trying to show. So it's quite interesting, that factor, when we come to selecting our own pictures. For me, the portfolio category is actually the second biggest prize in the wildlife photographer
Right.
after the overall winner.
Yeah.
And so, although we're kind of saying, oh, Tony was the underwater winner,
Yeah.
personally, the portfolio category is much higher profile than the underwater category.
Yeah.
And the underwater category, as we've commented before on this, is actually one of the smaller categories in this competition. And having success in other categories is often harder
Yeah.
because there's a lot more entries. So
Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic achievement. I would love to do well in the portfolio category in this competition, but didn't enter it this year. And I'm quite glad I didn't, because my pictures aren't as good as Lauren's ones. But also because last year, the winner of the portfolio category was underwater as well, with Angel Fitour's pictures. And, I put quite a lot of stay in, oh, I shouldn't enter this one because a similar shot did well the previous year.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I'm not convinced that's particularly good tactics, because I think each year the judges are new and they just go, well, these are our favorite shots, so bang. And I have to say, you can't fault these images for interest, difference, bringing imagery of subjects and species and vistas that we haven't seen before.
And I think they're very much, I think we also have very much the wildlife theme. They're very much wildlife imagery of a very unique environment. And I think that's, the number of people who've been there and captured these types of images is so few. It's right, it deserves to be awarded just because it's fairly groundbreaking, really.
Yeah, and they are very strong images of a world view. And I do think that is part of the challenge of wildlife photography is going out there and bringing back images that people haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes through technique, and it's sometimes simply through subject.
Yeah. So the animal portraits category, which I think I'm right in saying is one of the busier categories. Am I right, Alex?
Yeah, it's traditionally been the biggest category. And I would say that it would, on a normal year, would attract possibly even 10 times more entries than the underwater category. Gosh. So it's not an easy category to do well in.
Yeah. And the underwater, we have a bit of a show. Richard Robinson's picture, which we spoke about during the preamble, which obviously is fantastic eye contact with the whale. But then Scott Portelli's picture of a seal with a leafy sea dragon. It's an interesting combination of subjects, actually.
Yes, and I think it's. I'm very surprised. I mean, I think I remember saying to Scott at the awards that I'm surprised he put this in the portrait category, because for me, it's more about behaviour, but it's kind of more of an underwater picture. And I wouldn't have. I'm always quite analytical about the winners in terms of trying to learn in terms of my own entries and my own success in the competition. And I would never consider a picture like this a portrait first and foremost.
Yeah.
Especially then to enter it in the category that's much harder to win in, just on a pure numbers basis.
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really, cool image, because you've got a very, very cute Australian sea lion. And then you've got, one of the sort of the A-list celebrity species anywhere, a leafy sea dragon in front of it. And so having both of those in the picture.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced that the picture's a portrait of either of them.
No,
and it's the sort of picture that, in a judging room, you get one judge going, that's not a portrait, and suddenly it's out of the running.
Yeah.
But that obviously didn't happen. They obviously were happy that this was a portrait. I don't have any issues with the photo. I think it's really cool. I'm just surprised about the category.
Technically, I mean, again, it's a moment. The moment is what it is. But I would like to see a bit more separation of the sea dragon from the background, if possible. I think it runs the risk, and again, I guess this is probably different on a big screen, but it runs this risk of being slightly absorbed by the green background. The reason I say that, when I first looked at it, I thought it's a picture of I thought it was a seal, but I didn't. Then realised it wasn't. But that was my initial, and then I realised it. So almost, I mean, I guess that's engaging because it's forcing you to think through things. But it didn't hit me with a sledgehammer going, look at these two species. I recognised it later on, which. And then next up is Angel Fitour's octopus portrait. So I think, predictably, I'm going to sound. Knowing Angel, I'm sure this was shot in the most scrupulous way possible. Octopuses do go into the water column. They do things in the water column. I know both you and I have seen it happen, Alex.
Yeah.
But I'm concerned about awarding them in competitions just because it may encourage other people who will have less ethical considerations to try and emulate the image. And
I think both of us in an underwater photography competition would argue against a shot like this.
yes,
Because at the judging time, we wouldn't see the name attached to it.
Yep.
And we'd
Yep.
be very concerned about the ethics. I mean, in this case, it is a photographer who's got a fantastically robust ethical reputation. So I think in this case, we can be confident in that. And the composition, is fantastic. The swirl of the tentacles, that they're all so neatly in the frame and then frame the face so well,
Yep.
is all fantastic photographically.
Yep.
But yeah, I agree with you that in an underwater photography competition, I think we'd just say this is not the sort of image we want to encourage.
Yeah.
Because it would be so easily produced with underhand methods. And the wildlife photographer is aware of that.
Yeah.
Because they had a high profile winner of an octopus many years ago,
Yeah.
which is is a stunning image. But
Yeah.
they never include that picture in their retrospective books now, because there's a feeling that it's, even amongst the people that judged it at the time, that perhaps they got that one wrong, but they can't call it. So it becomes a slightly tarnished image in terms of history.
It's controversial, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's the point.
So I'm very surprised that they awarded another octopus, knowing that they've had a controversial octopus in the past.
Yeah.
That said, graphically, it is a stunning image.
It is, yeah. And how he managed to lit the octopus's face and not like the tentacles.
I think it's single strobe. It's single strobe.
I guess, yeah, really well controlled, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just, I think it's actually a single strobe with a relatively narrow beam,
Yeah.
and the foreground is in shade. And I think it's a good reminder that lighting everything up isn't always the key to creating powerful imagery.
Yeah. It is very subtly lit, isn't it? So, the next image is by this bloke called Mustard. I've never heard of him. It's not a traditional Alex Mustard image.
No, it's certainly one that I thought when I enter this, they'll never guess who took it.
No.
I think there's a few things I'd say about it. First of all, I'd say I'm very, very pleased to be awarded in this competition with a picture taken in the UK. I think as an underwater photographer, because the competition doesn't allow any backscatter removal, it biases the pictures towards pictures taken in clearer waters for obvious reasons. And as a result, it's a very long time since I can think of any underwater British picture that's been awarded in this competition.
Yeah.
Perhaps the last sort of marine one I can think of is Mark Webster's picture of a lumpsucker, which was probably back in the days when this competition had a British subjects category.
Yeah.
So a really long time ago. I would also say straight away that if you ask me to, pick my 100 or probably even 500 favorite underwater pictures or most impressive underwater pictures I've taken, this certainly wouldn't be in it.
Yeah.
Which is an unusual thing to say about a picture that's been awarded in the wildlife photographer.
Yeah.
But I think that I chose to enter this picture because I felt it had a good chance of success. And I would say that drives a lot of my entries into this competition. It's not about entering pictures that get the most likes on Instagram. It's not the pictures that other underwater photographers, most want to emulate of mine. It's about putting pictures in that you think have got a good chance.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, most of the photography I'd done in the year building up to this competition was done in the UK, and I'd done quite a big project on seaweeds, not with any intention for them to be competition shots, just because I wanted to have those shots to illustrate seaweed photography for stock images. And I got some really great wide-angle seaweed shots in Scotland that I'm really, really pleased with.
Yeah.
And as soon as I sort of took them and downloaded them, I was like, right, I'm going to save these and enter them in the wildlife photographer. And then last year, the plants and fungi category was won by Justin Gilligan's picture of a seaweed, like a wide-angle seaweed shot. And I'm like, oh, no, I can't enter it now because someone's already beaten me to it. So as a result, the only seaweed shot I had was this kind of more macro-y shot taken to enter. So it was very much, I wanted to enter a seaweed shot. I'd done a lot of seaweed photography and chose to enter this one. But yeah, was very surprised that it was awarded.
I think it really, the year of the quirk, obviously jokes aside, I think it definitely plays right into the judges' their apparent kind of what they like and dislike. I love the color palette in it. I love the parallel lines in it. The lines in it, but it's certainly not you can't consider it in any way traditional. It's something completely different. That's refreshing in itself.
Graphically strong, but it's not very exciting. I think the one thing I would say that is of interest of it is that this picture and the photo of the black and white photo of Jax that was awarded 3 years ago in the Wildlife Photographer.
I'll dig it out.
They're both taken with the WACP, and I think that is a really interesting or a really good measure of how versatile that lens is. If you compare this shot and then the black and white Jax shot and say these are taken with the same underwater lens, look at the range of images you can create with that one lens. And I think it's those two coming together is a really great sort of pat on the back to Nauticam to say thank you for making that great lens for us, because look at the variety of images we can create with it.
Yeah, and I mean, you again, between the two images, you've got these wonderful curves and you've got these very definite straight lines, and it's doing both so well. It was more the magnification difference I was talking about, but
it does show both. That when you zoom it in, it doesn't have a lot of distortion in, I guess.
Yeah, lovely. Well done, Alex. Congratulations, by the way.
I'm very happy to do well the British picture. I actually gave on the evening of the talk that I was saying earlier, I gave a talk with Tony Wu that in the end of the week. And I couldn't even get this picture into my talk about British marine life. I had too many other good shots that were better than it. So, it's not the highest in my opinion of my own photos, but very happy with the success.
Yeah. No, it's lovely, Alex. Well done. So we then have got Jürgen Freund's picture of the sea snakes, sea kraits, a family of them, presumably in a mangrove root. It's an over under image, isn't it?
Yeah. And this for me is I like the image very much. It's the sort of image that I would say is brilliant for books. It's very much like really good quality stock image showing the habitat, showing the life of these snakes, revealing behavior. It's a sort of picture I would expect to be, and Yogi's had a huge amount of success in this competition, and I'm sure knows what he was doing when he was entering it. But I would say it's the sort of picture I would expect to be awarded 10 years ago in the competition, in terms of it being very classic wildlife photography, executed technically very well, in focus above and below the surface, telling an interesting biological story in an interesting habitat that you don't see pictures from very much. But I feel it lacks some of the graphic strength of some of the modern pictures. But I really enjoy the behavior side of it, and I guess the category is behavior. And this year the judges probably said, well, this is a really strong on the behavior front, so let's have it. And I guess sea snakes or sea kraits, you don't see a lot of behavior stories of them because most people don't get to glimpse that part of their life. So perhaps that is a bit more interesting to actually see some behavior from a species that we generally just see photos of it swimming around or hunting. Actually seeing another aspect of its life. So I guess the judges really responded to that side of it.
Yeah, I think uniqueness, quirkiness.
Yeah.
Moving on to the ocean's bigger picture, which I think it's a new category for this year. I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I, Alex?
No, it was new last year.
All right, great.
And it's about telling important stories from the ocean, and there's also one on rivers and freshwater and wetlands as well. Two categories which but I think the competition is still trying to find exactly what it's looking for from this category.
And the first one, what's going on there, Alex? I'm not quite sure actually. So,
the first one, if I blush to have to tell you what's going on here, Adam, but that's a daddy whale and a mummy whale who love each other very much. So I
mean, okay.
They're right whales. I think it's an amazing, they're a type of whales that have been heavily persecuted. They come into shallow water. They were easily hunted. And the population at the Auckland Islands in particular, which is, south off New Zealand, have begun to rebound. And Richard Robinson has done, done this big project there, filming them, shooting them. And this is this is a great behavior shot. I'm surprised it wasn't in a behavior categories. I'm not convinced it's. I mean, there is a great conservation story behind it,
Yep.
but I'm not. And this picture obviously shows the success of that conservation.
Specifically,
But
yeah.
yeah, but I do think it doesn't necessarily speak to the issue that strongly. And I think it's where this category is still trying to find its feet. Is it, do you want a natural history shot, which for me this is.
Yeah.
This isn't photojournalism, it's more natural history.
Yeah.
That's going to drive the category forward, and it's going to be basically natural history stories which you can then attach an environmental message to.
Yeah.
Or do you want images that really speak to environmental messages? And I think the competition probably wants both, but it makes it very hard as a contestant to enter.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, obviously the moment, all the rest, yeah, okay, absolutely. But it's not that powerful image. It doesn't go out and conserve the oceans. Now, knowing the backstory to it, yes, okay, I can. But the majority of people looking at this image will not know the backstory to it.
No, I guess, yeah, and the judges probably didn't as well at the time of judging, which is,
yeah, true.
I also would say that Richard Robinson's portrait of the whale is a faultless portrait.
Yeah.
And I'm also surprised that the judges, because when you judge the wildlife photographer, you've basically got 100 slots to get pictures into, and you've got 50,000 pictures to squeeze into those 100 slots. And I'm very surprised that they felt that there was room for 2 of these right whale shots.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised they didn't play off against each other. And in which case, I would say the other one is so faultless a portrait that I'm surprised this one didn't have that against it almost.
Yeah. So the highly commended in the oceans, in the bigger picture, Russell Laman's image of I think it's a sea lion, isn't it? With the jellyfish in the background, and then the carcass of something on the bottom. I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, you see, to me, that's actually there's a great story going on there, and lots of different levels. And you've got this slight kind of, particularly in mono, it's slightly dystopian. The jellyfish have got the sort of somewhat alien, as they do, somewhat alien sort of characteristics. You've got the very recognisable sea lion, which is obviously a iconic species in its own right, hovering over this sort of dead and decaying carcass. And I think that's actually a very powerful image. I think it can go lots of different directions in terms of narrative. I think the moment is well shot. I think he's picked a good moment. And I think it has, in terms of what I would see as the category's purpose. I think it really has kind of a tale to tell.
No, I agree. I think it's I would say this is a picture that you could see awarded many years into wildlife photographer.
Yeah,
I think it does struggle just a touch image quality wise, and I know that's because it was Russell was using a relatively basic underwater camera,
right?
But it's a little bit fuzzy, I would say,
it is, yeah.
When you see it bigger. But yeah, I love the moment, the jellyfish. It's a very good shot, as you might expect with Russell's upbringing. His father, obviously being Tim. Right, next one.
It's Judith van der Grint's picture of.
I think it's a bride's whale or a brooder's whale.
Brooder's whale with entangled, isn't it? And the freediver's trying to remove the entanglement.
Yeah. This one for me, it's a nice shot telling that story. In the Azores, I don't think it's something we haven't seen before. You do quite regularly see pictures of whales being rescued and entangled. I think it's a good fit for the category, but yes. I'm not convinced that it's anything that is so groundbreaking. I would say I don't mind that the wildlife. I mean, this is our last picture that we're going to talk about. So, just to conclude, I don't, I benefited from it being a year where the judges were definitely open to sort of slightly more unusual images. But I do feel that the judges of the competition, although they change every year, they should perhaps be more aware of the history of the competition and where you have subject matter that, we've seen that type of subject matter before. and if the picture is not significantly moving the game on, I'm not convinced it's necessarily, within the competition.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it's not no point saying, oh yeah, we've seen whales being rescued in other competitions, therefore it doesn't deserve a place here. But
Yeah.
there have been shots like that in this competition before, and I think it's there's nothing can't really fault this shot, other than it doesn't really move the game on. But it does fit the category very well, and I think maybe while they're trying to establish what this category is about, it's a good image to have in there. It's not, it's not a picture that I don't feel is worthy in any way. I should just say, I just think it's a picture that perhaps feels we've seen stuff a bit like this before.
And I think that possibly, to brings us to the sort of rounding up my thoughts on the competition. And my concern about this quirkiness is it could become for the competition something that it seeks. And basically it's out quirk the year before, and we just end up disappearing into the realm of the sort of really kind of we start sacrificing graphic qualities for uniqueness, difference, and I hope that isn't the case. Obviously, you can't say that now, but that would be my concern.
Wouldn't say. I mean, although the overall, I said at the beginning, the overall winner are the bees. I would say overall, there's some phenomenal photography and some very graphic and very powerful images. I think when you pull out the underwater pictures from there, it is quite a quirky set of underwater pictures. Yeah. But I think within the contest as a whole, it's very strong. And whenever you go there, you always get swept up in it all. And I came back thinking, wow, it was an amazing event, and really loved the pictures this year.
Yeah.
But when I came home, I actually looked at the book of last year when I came home, just to have a flick through after having spent so much time looking at this year's pictures. And I definitely felt last year's collection was stronger.
Yeah.
Overall, not just the underwater stuff. I mean, I think this year it is quite a quirky underwater set. And you've been in judging rooms like me, and it is, you do sometimes within a judging room get a bit stuck in a style.
Yes, absolutely.
In a particular year. And I think it's, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we all like this year, and we all like this year. And you end up going down a certain route. And perhaps the underwater stuff this year, there was too much. I do think in the wildlife photographer, they get so many images entered, and so many classically good underwater images that they almost count against each other. And the pictures, I'm sure no one else chose to enter a close-up shot of seaweed in the competition. And that's probably why my shot did well, because it wasn't trying to compete with other people's seaweed shots. It was trying to compete with, 30 people putting in pictures of, whale sharks or something.
There's certainly the element of that finding unique imagery. I mean, I certainly, and you can't do it on the base, but I certainly hope the competition continues to embrace the powerful and dramatic, as well as the unique and the quirky. I'm sure it will. It's just an observation on this year, really.
Yeah, but I have to say that big congratulations to everyone who's awarded.
Absolutely.
As we always say with these, we try and cast a critical eye on the pictures, because they've already had their success. They're already, great images. And if we just sit here saying everything is great, it's not a very interesting conversation. So nice to chat to you about them, Adam.
Yes, nice to chat. Obviously, you can see more of Alex's seaweed at www.amustard.com. And thank you very much, Alex. It's always nice to chat to you. I'm sorry it's taken so long. And I'd like to thank our sponsor again for this episode, which is Nauticam. We really appreciate our sponsor support. And please feel free to add your comments or suggestions about the images, what you like, what you don't like, and to drop us a like if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again soon.